Hello and welcome to another video that will get you the very top grades really quickly. Our theme today is obviously Macbeth, and we're looking at his hamartia, the technical term for his fatal flaw, and we're asking if it really is ambition that is his fatal flaw, his hamartia. I'm going to try and convince you that the top grades are easy, and we'll do that by looking at the grade 7 interpretation. His ambition is his hamartia. Then we'll look at some context to back that up. But then we will jump to some grade 9 interpretation, which says no, there is something more than ambition that is his hamartia. And then we'll go to some more context to back that interpretation up. As we go through the presentation, you'll see quite a few words in bold. Those are the ones to take notes around if you want to ace this bit of revision. And I strongly encourage you to do that, because then the video will have doubled or trebled its power. You'll get to grade 7, 8 and 9 really quickly. Let's look at that conventional interpretation. Macbeth asks himself how he can let his mind yield to that suggestion whose horrid image doth unfix his hair. This is the suggestion of killing Duncan, committing regicide. His own ambition is a shock to him. That's why his hair is unfixing, standing on end. So that his own hair stands on end as though his body is terrified of the workings of his own mind. It also suggests that until now Macbeth did not know he had this ambition, and that's why it's so scary now. After all, he's just saved Scotland from an invasion and should be rejoicing that he saved the country, but instead he's thinking about doing exactly what the traitor did in trying to help the Norwegians get rid of Duncan. He's suddenly thinking, oh, I'll do this myself. When he decides he will overcome this fear and give in to his ambition, he complains, I have no spur to prick the size of my intent. In other words, now he accepts this terrible image, but then thinks, I still don't have the inner conviction to do it. I've got ambition, but I haven't got enough evil inside me. He realizes his ambition alone is not strong enough to force him to commit the evil, and blasphemous means going against God, the blasphemous act of regicide. We can also back up this conventional interpretation by looking at how Lady Macbeth sees her husband. So her assessment of him is also that he's too good, too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. That's where the ambition comes in. And she portrays him as having too little ambition at this stage. However, his final fears are not so much that his soul will go to hell and that the angels will side against him, but that his ambition will not be realized. So when she starts to persuade him to kill Duncan, he asks her if we should fail. Her words, the ones which finally convince him, we know that because this is her final argument, are totally focused on ambition. She says, we fail. The truth is that the chance to realize their ambition and fail is more attractive than simply accepting a lesser title than king. So the lesser title is becoming Thane of Cawdor, and Lady Macbeth is saying, look, that doesn't count for enough. You've just saved the country, you deserve more. Why shouldn't you be king? And we should risk everything, even failure, being exposed and being executed. That would still be worth risking to realize this ambition. So there's our conventional interpretation. The final thing that convinces him is her appeal to this ambition to become king. Let's back this up with some context and ask, well, why would Shakespeare portray a character who had this ambition to kill a king? Well, it's because of the political situation in England. So this play is written in 1605 and performed in 1606, and in 1603 King James had come to the throne because the previous monarch, Queen Elizabeth I, had died without an heir. So there are competing factions in the court, and the court is what we call all the nobles who come to attend the king. They all represent the most powerful families in England. And some of them, many perhaps, do not want James as a king. He's come from Scotland, and they don't really trust him, and they think there are better people who are English who should become king. But Shakespeare, of course, is performing this at the court of King James, and he changes the name of his actors to be the king's players. He wants James's influence, his patronage. And so he portrays Macbeth as a character with ambition who gets condemned to hell by God in order to warn all the other nobles, the other factions who might want to get rid of King James, that they too will go to hell if they commit regicide. So consequently, Macbeth serves as a warning against the ambition of the nobles. And so we can conclude that the play is therefore partly political propaganda supporting the king. Well, that will definitely bag you the grade 7, and many of you will be able to write right now at grade 9. But let's make assurance double sure, as Macbeth says, and look at the alternative interpretation, which will give you that higher grade for sure. So the alternative is that his flaw, his hamartia, is not ambition, but actually bloodlust. He just wants to kill and spill blood. Macbeth has no real ambition. His first reaction to becoming Thane of Cawdor is repulsion. And he demands of Ross and Lennox, I think it is, "Why do you dress me in borrowed robes?" As though he would be uncomfortable assuming more power. The ambition doesn't appeal to him at all. However, Lady Macbeth's intimate knowledge of him as being too full of the milk of human kindness also tells us that before the battle with Norway, he had little ambition. So he sets off on this battle at too full of the milk of human kindness. Lady Macbeth knows him intimately, and she correctly diagnoses him as not being ambitious. So our next question is, well, do the witches force him to be ambitious? When they say that he shalt be king hereafter. No, they don't, because Banquo immediately asks, "Why do you start and seem to fear things that do sound so fair?" Well, this shows us quite clearly that Macbeth is horrified by what the witches have told him. He's not ambitious to become king at this stage at all. So, to see what has changed in him, we must not look for ambition. Instead, we need to look at his bloodlust. So listen again to the description of Macbeth in battle. We get this from the sergeant who has been at the battle. He's really badly wounded, but he stops to tell the king about the battle that he's just left. So he's describing Macbeth, disdaining fortune, and with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution, like Valor's minion, carved out his passage, till he faced the slave. So this is the leader of the foreign army, which ne'er shook hands, nor bade farewell to him, till he unseamed him from the nave to the chaps. So that's from the navel to the chaps, the chin, and he's unseamed this enemy, and then fixed his head upon our battlements. Now, you're probably familiar with that quotation. However, you've probably ignored this bit, and it's going to be very important. Let's see how that plays out. So Macbeth has a psychopathic addiction to violence and blood. Although leading an army, he rejects any sense of tactical thinking and immerses himself in bloody execution. Although these words are spoken in praise of Macbeth, they reveal his recklessness because he is disdaining fortune. In other words, he's not thinking about the consequences of what he's doing. He's risking death, and obviously if he dies, his whole army could suffer because he is their leader with the tactical plan. And yet, he doesn't hang back and look at the battle as a whole. He just gets straight in and starts bloody execution. Macbeth kills MacDonald, so this is a traitorous Scotsman, in a way which revels in his death. We've looked at how he unseamed him from the nave to the chaps, but This can only be done closely facing your enemy. A sword is too heavy to slice a man open from the navel to the chin. This can only be achieved by holding him with one hand and stabbing and slicing him while staring him in the face, because that's how close you would be. We know Macbeth would be covered in gore from this killing, as well as watching his enemy's pain. So this description from the sergeant is actually quite horrific. He also indulges in sick humour, shaking MacDonald's hand as he bleeds out and then bidding farewell with a casual goodbye as he dies. It's like a kind of comic Arnold Schwarzenegger film. So if we go back to this, once he has done this, then he shakes MacDonald's hand and then he says goodbye, because this doesn't kill him. It's a fatal wound and an incredibly painful way for him to die, but he's still alive as Macbeth jokes with him about the fact that he's going to die. And of course, this is a medieval battle. It's not just two blokes fighting. There will be hundreds of others fighting around them. And so the longer you are trying to kill your enemy, the more opportunity there is for another enemy to attack you from behind. So really, this attack on MacDonald and the way he kills him further puts Macbeth at great risk, but he doesn't care because he's so involved in the goriness of death. So when we understand this about Macbeth, we have an alternative explanation for why he sees a vision of a dagger before killing Duncan, because he imagines it covered in blood. And on thy blade and dudgeon, gouts of blood. It's the blood that he's obsessed with, because this is the way he verbalizes his bloodlust. And it also gives us an alternative motive for carrying the groom's daggers with him once he has killed Duncan. He literally can't let go of them because metaphorically he can't let go of his addiction to violence and blood. So this symbolizes really directly the effect of his bloodlust. Well, what else in the play would back up this alternative interpretation? Well, it also explains why he slaughters the grooms the next day rather than stick to Lady Macbeth's plan, which, remember, was to blame the grooms for killing Duncan. It explains why he doesn't tell Lady Macbeth about his plan to kill Banquo, because she will support him in the murder to satisfy her ambition to become queen, but Banquo is no threat to Macbeth, who has already become king. So the ambition is realised. Lady Macbeth would not approve of then killing his best friend Banquo. And so he keeps her innocent of that knowledge, because he knows she will disapprove of his bloodlust. And again, this makes the point that it's not really ambition that's driving him. So this explains why when Banquo's ghost arrives, Macbeth doesn't focus just on the fact that he's dead. His words are, "Do not shake thy gory locks at me." His focus is on the gore, the bloody. And that's why when he decides to kill more citizens, his metaphor for this is that he is in a river of blood across which he will wade. Yep, I'm stepped in so far, he says, to turn back were as tedious as to go o'er. And it's a river of blood that he imagines, because that's what he's fixated on. It reveals in his metaphor the bloodlust in his state of mind. And finally, it explains why he will order the slaughter of Macduff's whole family, who pose no threat at all. Remember, when he has their family executed, Macduff's not even there. He's already gone to England. And it's just the family and the servants. There are no armed men there. They've gone with Macduff to England. And yet, he decides that he will slaughter them. And this is even after the witches have said no man born of woman shall harm Macbeth. So, he hasn't really got any motive other than the joy he takes in bloodlust. Okay, well, what context could we use to show that Shakespeare isn't really just interested in ambition, he's interested in a more powerful hamartia. Well, it is the gunpowder plot, the Guy Fawkes plot that you'll be familiar with. So after the gunpowder plot by Catholics, many feared that King James would have an excuse to hunt out potential traitors. He might seize the land of the nobles suspected of being Catholics and look to execute any court practicing their faith. In other words, revenge, but also bloodlust. There is a good deal of scholarly speculation, because nobody really knows enough about Shakespeare's life, so it can only be speculation, that Shakespeare himself was a Catholic. In fact, he was well known to have been drinking in the pub that the plotters all met in to come up with the gunpowder plot. You know, it was a Catholic pub. So this would indeed give him a motive for portraying the bloodlust of a king in such a negative way. So now, this portrayal of Macbeth is also a subtle warning to King James to say, look, don't be like Macbeth. Your subjects, the citizens of the country, will not love you and will not finally obey you if you give in to the idea of revenge and start executing loads of Catholics just because the plotters were Catholic. So it's a way for him to control King James's desire for revenge, and all the more important to Macbeth, to Shakespeare, if he himself was a Catholic. So he'll be saving people that he's deeply connected to, or perhaps he's friendly with in secret. Again, we don't know that for sure, but there is quite a bit of scholarly speculation that that's the case. And we have another spectacular piece of context from probably his most famous play now, Hamlet, which was written just 4 years later in 1609. And in this play, the character Hamlet stages a play within a play. So in the action of the play, he hires some actors to put on a play at the court of his father-in-law, who is now king, and he says, "The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king." In other words, we can see this idea that Shakespeare has already thought about using a play in order to influence a king's mind. So it's not just a Mr. Salles idea that I've just come up with, that he might want to influence King James. And one of the proofs that we can use is he makes his most famous character and his most famous play do exactly that, influence the king within the play. So here, Shakespeare could be doing exactly as his character does in Hamlet in 1609. Now, there's probably not another teacher in the country who's teaching that bit, so you know that when an examiner meets this idea in your essay, they're going to go, woo, let's go grade 9, go on, let's do it. Now, if you haven't been doing it as we go along, because, I don't know, the video's been so exciting, then take some notes, go back, look at the keywords, and make some notes you can revise from and nail that grade 9. You've had plenty here to give you a full essay with quotations from all over the play, so you can argue both sides that yes, he does appear to have his fatal flaw, his hamartia, as ambition, but when we look more closely, we realise that it is in fact bloodlust. Good luck. See you soon on my channel.